we start, I have a story I want to tell you. I'm on my third year of college, as many of you know. So about a year ago, I decided I was ready to start working. So I told my parents I want to work. I have free time on the afternoon. I had a free time on the afternoon because I only go to college in the morning. So I went, I had an interview in Aldea Business Park. I got hired on the spot, and the next week I started my training. Training lasted for 2 weeks. So this is how it went. Every 3 days you were tested. I was hired as a sales agent. So every 3 days during the training, you were going to have a quiz where they were going to evaluate how much you knew about the product. So the first day of training came in, and I was so nervous because I knew no one there, no one. And I was so afraid because I was going to be selling cable and telephone services and internet service for people in the US. So I'm in Honduras. I barely know Cable Color, Tigo, I think that it's Amnet now, and other cable companies. So imagine having to learn about all of the different cable companies in the whole US, where they divided them in depending on what state you were. They couldn't be more than 2 telcos. Yeah, I had no idea about that. So they tested me every 3 days to make sure I knew all of the products and make sure I was able to answer all of the customers' questions. By the end of the 2 weeks, I was going to be called from the head office from Human Resources on the main department, which is in Atlanta. She was going to call me and pretend she was the customer, and I had to sell her a product. So you might imagine how nervous I was. When that day came, I was so afraid of failing that test. I didn't want to tell my parents, hey, I failed the test, I didn't get the job. Even though they didn't make me look for a job, I wanted to, and they were proud of me. So make them prouder by passing the test. I was so afraid that was all I could think about. I didn't think about what I would do when I passed my test. No. All I could think about was I would do if I failed the test. So guess what? When I do the test, I failed. I didn't pass the test. Because I was so nervous during the call, I failed by 2 points. So I said some things, because you know our accent is different from the American accent. So she didn't understood what I said, and I failed. They said we were going to be able, the ones that failed, to retake the test the next day. When I got out of the office, I went to the bathroom, and I locked myself in the bathroom, and I started crying. I couldn't believe I didn't pass the test, because I am usually very competitive, and I don't like losing. So I started crying and sobbing like a baby uncontrollably. And then my subconscious come along, and she says to me, Michelle, do you have any idea how ridiculous you look crying because you didn't pass a test? You have no need to pass, thankfully, and you're here crying. Do you think that's going to make you pass the test tomorrow? So I stood up and I said to myself, you're right. I'm not going to do anything by crying. So I got home, I grabbed all of my notes from my notebook, and I studied. And the next day, all I could think about was, how am I going to handle college and work? All I could think about was, I am going to pass this test because I know everything. And I'm going to be the highest grade of all. I passed the test. And I had a 90% grade on the retake of the test. I was the highest of them all. And my trainers, they told me, Michelle, I really thought you were going to pass the test on the first try because you are always very attentive to the presentations we do. You know, you're right. So why am I telling you this? Because most of the times we are about to do something When a guy wants to ask a girl out, the first thing he's thinking, she's going to reject me. So the first thing all of us think about is, what are we going to do when we don't pass that, when we don't achieve what we expected to do? Instead of thinking, where am I going to take her, to the movies or to a restaurant? So today I'm going to give you some tips for you to follow when you are afraid to do something, and I hope you remember them. First, take a time out. If you're about to do something and you feel nervous and you start sweating and you look at your shirt and it's wet because of how nervous you are, you have itchy palms and then you clean themselves in your jeans, take a time out, okay? Take 5 to 10 minutes, walk around, think about rainbows and bunnies and puppies and cotton candies. Grab a cup of tea, whatever makes you feel comfortable so that you can relax yourself before you do something. Prepare for a peaceful performance. When we go to the dentist, we usually think, oh my gosh, she's going to grab a saw and she's going to make me bleed and I am going to be in so much pain. No, okay? Nothing is going to happen. Prepare yourself. Think about being in the dentist before being in the dentist, and think about how comfortable you're going to be, because they have really nice pictures on the wall, and the chair is so comfortable I'm going to sleep while the dentist do whatever he's going to do to my mouth. Okay? What's the worst that can happen, right? So, you're about to go to a presentation. Imagine yourself where everyone is looking at you and everyone knows what the mistakes you're making. So, what's the worst that can happen? You're going to have a heart attack. I am going to start panicking during the presentation and I'm going to get a bad grade on that presentation. No, okay? You're not going to have chances are you're not having a heart attack during the presentation. So just relax and think about, welcome the worst. You already prepared yourself for the worst thing that could happen, so you are going to welcome them. When you ask for your parents for permission to go to a party, you already know what the worst that can happen. You're going to deny you that permission, right? So after you try to convince them to let them go, if they still don't agree with you, now what can you do? You're not gonna jump out of the window, right? Because they will find out. Well, that's you embrace your fears, right? He said no, well, I'm going to escape through a window. He said no. But embrace that fears. Don't be afraid of them. Maybe of your parents. The aware technique. Number 1, A, accept the fear. Don't fight it. The fear is always going to be there, so don't try to fight it. Just accept it and work along with it. Watch it. Breathe longer. The fear is there. You're looking at it through his eyes, so just look at him and say, watch me do it. Take a deep breath and do it. Act normally. As I said, have you ever taken a public speaking class? Yes? So imagine having an audience that knows what you're not supposed to do, and you're there presenting and you do what you're not supposed to do, and they notice you did it. Don't pay attention to it. Act normally. Nothing is going to happen. If you pretend it didn't happen, then it probably didn't. Repeat the steps above if necessary. Accept it again. Watch it. Take a deep breath and act normally. And always, but always expect for the best. Okay? Never expect the worst outcome. You always have to be prepared for the best thing that can happen. Because normally, when the best things happen, that's when we get more surprised, don't we? And the last one, reward yourself. After you did it, you beat fear's ass, reward yourself. Go with that hamburger you wanted to eat all week, but you couldn't because you were sleep into 2 a.m., take a bath, relax, some sense, or go to the movies with a friend. So, partner. So, may you always do what you are afraid to do. Do you have any questions? Yes.
What's your worst fear?
My worst fear. I am so afraid of heights. Like one time I was in Lake Yohoa and I was walking with my cousin. And there was like this big like a dirt mountain when we were walking along, and like here was the lake. And we were goofing around and there was like mudslide and I fell. And my cousins were up and they were crying because they were laughing so hard. And I'm like crying because I can't get myself out. And I'm like, help me please. And they didn't believe me. They thought I was joking. When I was able to pull myself out by myself, I lost my sandal. And those were the only pair of sandals I had allowed with me on the lake. So since that day, I am so afraid of heights that every time I see someone, my cousin jumped from a plane to do skydiving, and I can't picture myself doing that unless they push me down the plane. Any other questions? Yes.
What's your best advice for us?
The best advice, as I said before, is to accept the fear. And what's the worst that can happen? You know, you always have worst case scenarios in your mind, so be prepared for them. If they do come, if the worst case you thought appears, then you have to embrace it. There's nothing else you can do. But don't leave yourself thinking, what if? You know? Because at least you will leave thinking that you did it, not what could have happened. Yes?
What's the worst that could happen if someone pushes you off the plane?
That's an unnecessary question, right? So, if someone pushes you out of a plane, you pray you have your parachute on. Yes.
And that it works. Well,
And that it works, okay? And you have someone who knows how to use it. So now, let me end the presentation with a video. I think you know this, guys. Face your fears. What's the worst that can happen, right?
Break your nose.
No.